A few years ago, I was in a village school in Cambodia with my sister. We were volunteer teachers there for kids who came from homes where they didn't have electricity or running water or television. They mostly lived their lives outside, looking after the buffalo and the rice paddies, helping out there with their families, or just playing with their friends. Time for these kids was about day and night, wet season and dry season. We were at the school when they got their very first laptop. They took it outside into the schoolyard and hooked it up to a pole that had a solar panel on the top. The kids were really curious and they gathered around looking at the colours on the screens, tapping all the buttons and playing with the mouse. Then one of the kids pointed to the internet icon and asked me what it was. At first, I wanted to tell him about all the amazing things he could discover and use. He could find out about weather patterns for the crops. He could help his brother who was sick, and he could get a better job outside the village. Then I pictured him glued to that computer screen for endless hours, not bothered with his mother, too busy for his friends, and bored with village life. I looked at my sister and wondered whether we were witnessing these kids progress to a better or worse quality of life. How could just one click on that internet button change the choices they made about how to use their time and focus their attention? I've wondered that about myself a lot lately too. Do I use my time to create a better or worse quality of life for me? Do I focus on things every day that make me happy or keep me miserable? Over the past 12 years, I've learned that quality of life isn't about how much time you have or how long you get to live. It's about how you focus your attention during that time so you really get to live. I'd like to share a few stories with you today about how I learned that. The first really big choice I had to make about how I use my time was when I was about 35 years old. I had been married to this man, Deb Rae, for about 11 years when we were told that we couldn't have children. The future that we had envisioned for ourselves became a blank canvas. We knew that we could continue to live our lives the way we had, pretty happily, working in our jobs, paying off the mortgage, seeing our friends on the weekends. But we had friends who had similar lives who seemed stuck in jobs they didn't really like and then worked there for way too many hours, so they didn't have time for their family. And there were other friends who couldn't wait until they could retire and they could finally be free to go and have some fun. Stu and I knew we had an opportunity. We didn't have to keep saving our money for braces and school fees and a bigger house. Our time was our own. We could choose to create a completely different life where every day was an adventure. So we did. We decided that we would travel the world teaching English for as long as we wanted, and we'd start in Poland. We upgraded our qualifications, we sold our furniture, our car, our home, we quit our jobs, and we were off. And we were right. It was a big adventure. We learned some Polish language and we made friends with teachers from all over the world. And we saw and did things that we never knew existed before. We also fairly frequently got lost and we completely misunderstood cultural differences and seriously underestimated the bite of a Polish winter. My time in Poland made me realise that the choices I make about my time need to be meaningful to me, regardless of what anyone else is doing. And that meaning can sometimes be much more important than being comfortable. Some of the situations Stu and I found ourselves in Poland were not pretty and they were not easy. But we always felt like we were really living. My second big lesson about time and attention also happened when we were in Poland. We'd been there for about 5 months and Stu had gone out with some friends when I got a phone call to say that he'd been in an accident. I eventually found him in a Polish hospital in intensive care. The doctors there told me that he wouldn't wake up, that he would die before the end of that day. In those final hours with Stu, all I wanted was to just be there. I wanted to imprint on my mind everything about him, what he looked like, what he smelled like, what it felt like to hold his hand in mine. I didn't care about the details of the accident or what might happen to me the next day, and I was oblivious to how much time had passed. I just wanted to be there in his presence. The death of my husband is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. But those final few hours with Stu weren't about pain or sadness. They were some of the best moments I've ever spent with anyone. In those moments, I was really there and nowhere else. I was completely consumed by our connection with each other, and I was so grateful for the time that we had shared. I learned the value of every moment we have with people that we care about, or even people we don't care about. Any time we have with another person is an opportunity to make a connection, and those connections are the most important thing we'll ever have. They deserve for us to give them their full attention and to really be there. After Stu died, time seemed endless to me. The usual compulsion to find lots of things to do just didn't make sense anymore. And thinking about the future was impossible and ridiculous. So I was mostly driven by a fairly random instinct. I panicked fairly regularly about how much time I was wasting and how long it might take to get my life back on track, but my instinct told me to keep going. I just wanted to read and study and write and talk with other women about their experiences of grief and then see if it was anything like what was happening for me. The conversations I had with those women, in those conversations, time had no place. We were talking about the worst experiences of our lives. One woman told me about how her partner had died from cancer. Then she was dealing with a diagnosis of terminal cancer for herself. Another woman shared the story of holding her stillborn child for the first time. And another woman explained to me how she talked to her son about the suicide of his father. In those moments, in those connections, I simultaneously became more vulnerable and more brave than I had ever been. My attention was transfixed and I had to do more. Well, it took me about 10 years to do more, but all that time I was wasting by reading and writing and talking resulted in me producing a book about dealing with grief. I also started a support group for other young widows. It was emotionally and physically painful, and it induced a magnitude of procrastination, but it was important. I created a sense of purpose for myself, something that worked for me and supported a lot of other women as well. And it was meaningful. It was something that deserved my full attention. I also learned that the only time that's wasted is the time when we're not really there, when we're doing too many things at once or just not paying attention. But when we're doing something that's truly meaningful for us and we're with people we really care about and we give them our full attention and we're right there in the fun and the painful moments, that time can never be wasted. It's 12 years now since Stu died, and my life has become a completely different place. I've worked through my grief in that time, but there was a couple of things I still needed to learn about time and attention. And I learned some of these sitting in a car outside my sister's house where there was a party. Inside the car with me was my new boyfriend. Outside the car at the party were my family and friends who would meet this new boyfriend for the very first time. If I could convince myself to get out of the car, I just couldn't bring myself to unclick that seatbelt. I looked at the people in that party and I saw my past. taking my new boyfriend in there would make it very obvious that my past was gone, that Stuart was gone. I just didn't know if I wanted to see that pain on their faces again. So I set some ground rules. I told my boyfriend he's only allowed to talk to these certain people. We're not allowed to hold hands. He had to be prepared for someone to accidentally call him Stuart, and I might burst into tears at any moment. Well, even thinking about it was making me feel so sick, and it just all seemed so hard, and I said, let's just skip the party and go home. But my boyfriend didn't drive away. We stayed sitting in the car, and he asked me a question. He said, what if we go inside and people are relieved to see you happy? They like me, and we have a good time. I unclicked the seatbelt and I went inside. I talked to lots of people and we held hands. There were some awkward moments, but no one was irreparably damaged. And my family and friends did get to know and like my new boyfriend, which was lucky because he became my new husband. Sitting in that car, I learned a few lessons about time and attention. I came to see how strongly the past had hold of my attention, and it was governing every decision I made. And I realised that the assumptions I was making about the future were paralysing me with fear. And then I realised how quickly I could let it all go. When I unclicked that seatbelt, I released my grip on the past and I stopped fretting about the future. And then in that moment, there was no anxiety. I knew exactly what I wanted, that I could handle whatever happened, and then I could create my own future. I finally got my scattered attention back to being right here, where I was in control. Winifred Gallagher is the author of Wrapped, Attention and a Focused Life. She talks about brilliantly how the importance of us managing our attention. She first explains that there are two ways that we can manage our attention. And the first is a quite primitive one where we're drawn to the most shiny, brightest, most obvious things in our environment. And originally that was a survival mechanism because it would alert us to potential dangers around us. In the modern world though, it looks more like constantly checking your phone or going through your Facebook news feed or being hooked on the latest TV series. Gallagher also explains there's another way we can use our attention, and that's to take responsibility for where it goes. Attention shapes our experiences by what we zero in on or not. We need to choose to take control of our attention. I know from my experience, and you can probably relate to this from your own experience as well, how easy it is for my attention to fall back into those primitive habits and get dragged back into the past, to the stories that make me sad and angry, or into assumptions and expectations about the future that cause stress and anxiety. Or how just one click on the internet button or a quick check of my emails can steal my attention for hours. But I also know now how easy it is to get my attention back. And I can do that with another type of click of my fingers. When you choose to take control of it, your attention is very willing and incredibly responsive. Just one click can bring your attention back from all kinds of negative thoughts, anxieties, fears, concerns, to being right here, where you're safe and in control. This works for everyone, not just me. If you ever want to get your attention back to the things that matter most to you, or to focus on things that make you feel good rather than bad, just click your fingers. You'll notice how instantly your attention zips right back into the present moment. And when you're there, you can make a deliberate choice about what to give your attention to next. Try it with me. Ready? Click. And be right here. It's your attention and you're in control. When I think back to those kids in the Cambodian village huddled around that computer, I now know what I'd say to them. I'd tell them that this computer can give them access to information from all over the world that can make their lives happier and a lot easier. This is brave and vulnerable enough to really be there in every moment of your life, whatever it offers. Know that that's where your life really is. In those moments, you know exactly what you want and that you can handle whatever happens. Having all the time in the world can't give you a better quality of life. Only you can do that by what you choose to ignore, what feelings, situations, thoughts or devices you'll put away, and what matters most to you that you'll give all of your time, energy and attention. You can do that whenever you want. It's over to you now. Just click and be right here.